Welcome back to Red Fence. I'm your host, ABH, and today we're taking a deeper look at one of the most closely watched political figures in the country right now, New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani. Not just what he's doing, but how he's doing it. Because if you've been watching politics long enough, you know this. Policy gets headlines, but method determines outcomes. Let's set the stage. Mamdani didn't arrive as a caretaker. He didn't campaign as a systems manager. He came in as a disruptor with a clear ideological framework and a willingness to test it in one of the most complex cities on earth. New York isn't just any city. It's a financial hub, a cultural engine, and a pressure cooker of competing interests. If you're going to attempt structural change here, you're not tweaking, you're stress testing the entire system. And that's exactly what he appears to be doing. At its core, Mamdani's approach is rooted in a belief that markets left to themselves don't produce fair outcomes in essential areas like housing, healthcare access, and basic cost of living. So instead of nudging the system, he's trying to rebalance it. You see that most clearly in housing. His administration has pushed for expanded rent stabilization, increased public housing investment, and stronger tenant protections. The theory is straightforward. Housing is not just a commodity, it's a public necessity, and government has a responsibility to actively shape that market. But here's where it gets complicated. New York's housing ecosystem isn't isolated. It's tied to investment flows, pension funds, development incentives, and global capital. When you intervene aggressively, you don't just change rent, you change behavior. Developers slow down. Investors reassess risk. Supply pipelines shift. So the real question isn't whether intervention sounds good, it's whether it holds under pressure. And that's still an open question. Now let's talk about where the money goes. Mamdani's budgeting choices reflect a clear shift in priorities. Less emphasis on traditional policing expansion, more emphasis on social services, mental health infrastructure, and community-based programs. This aligns with a broader ideological view that long-term public safety is driven more by stability than enforcement. But again, execution matters. Because reallocating funds isn't just about values, it's about timing and consequences. If alternative systems aren't fully built out before traditional ones are scaled back, gaps emerge. And in a city like New York, gaps get noticed fast. Supporters argue that he's correcting decades of imbalance. Critics argue he's moving too quickly without enough structural redundancy. Both arguments carry weight. Now this is where Mamdani really stands out. He doesn't just govern through policy, he governs through narrative. Every major move is framed, explained, and broadcast directly to the public. Social media isn't an afterthought, it's a primary channel. Messaging is consistent, values-driven, and often preemptive. That's not accidental. It reflects a broader shift in political strategy. Don't rely on institutions to interpret your actions, define them yourself in real time. And in an era of fragmented media, that's powerful, but it comes with a trade-off. When you own the narrative, you also own the fallout. There's no plausible deniability, no media buffer to absorb criticism. If something underdelivers, it's not just a policy failure, it's a credibility test. So far, Mamdani has managed to maintain a strong connection with his base. The question is whether that holds under sustained pressure. Another defining feature of his administration. He's not avoiding conflict, he's using it. Whether it's clashes with real estate interests, pushback against corporate influence, or tension with state-level actors, Mamdani's approach is often confrontational rather than conciliatory. Now, traditionally, city governance leans toward quiet negotiation, deals behind closed doors, incremental movement. Mamdani is flipping that model. He's bringing disagreements into the open and using public opinion as leverage. That can be effective. Public pressure can move institutions that otherwise resist change, but it's also volatile. When conflict becomes a primary tool, you risk hardening opposition rather than softening it. Stakeholders dig in. Compromise becomes politically costly. And over time, that can limit what actually gets implemented. Let's talk about something that doesn't get enough attention in political messaging. Mobility. Capital move. People move. Businesses relocate. New York has always walked a tightrope between regulation and attraction. Too much restriction and you risk losing the very tax base that funds public programs. Mamdani's policies are testing that balance. Supporters argue that a fairer, more stable city will ultimately attract long-term investment. Critics argue that short-term uncertainty could trigger an exodus before those benefits materialize. There are already early signals, some mixed, some inconclusive. And that's the reality. Economic shifts don't happen overnight. They unfold gradually, then all at once. No mayor operates in a vacuum. Mamdani's agenda intersects with state government, federal funding structures, regulatory frameworks that he doesn't fully control. And that's where friction shows up. Even if you have a clear mandate locally, implementation often depends on cooperation from institutions that may not share your priorities. So what we're seeing is not just policy rollout, it's institutional negotiation, sometimes subtle, sometimes very public. And that raises a deeper question. How much can a city-level leader actually transform without alignment from higher levels of government? History suggests less than they promised, but sometimes more than expected if they pick their battles carefully. Public perception is holding for now. Mamdani maintains strong support among younger voters and those aligned with his broader ideological vision. There's a sense that he's at least attempting to address systemic issues rather than managing symptoms. But broader city sentiment is more mixed. Concerns about cost of living, public safety, and economic stability don't disappear just because there's a new framework in place. If anything, expectations rise. And when expectations rise faster than results, political capital starts to erode. That's the clock every reform-driven administration runs against. Step back and this becomes bigger than New York. Mamdani is effectively running a live experiment in progressive urban governance at scale. If it works, if housing stabilizes, if public services improve, if economic disruption stays contained, it will become a blueprint. Other cities will follow. If it struggles, if costs rise, if investment drops, if systems strain, it will be cited as evidence that this model doesn't hold under real-world conditions. And you can be sure both sides are watching closely, ready to claim validation. Right now, we're in the early to middle phase. Too soon for final judgments. Too late to call it theoretical. What we're seeing is governance under pressure, ideas meeting reality in real time. Mamdani isn't maintaining the system. He's testing its limits. And whether that leads to adaptation or breakdown is still unfolding. That's it for today's episode of Red Fence. Stay sharp, stay questioning, and keep your eyes on the systems, not just the headlines. I'll see you next time.